Oh, yes, that was the second round. We know how long.
All right. Debbie's not going to make it tonight, unfortunately. So she's not going to be here for this meeting. We only have a couple things really to talk about. One of the main things I wanted to talk about is I worked very hard on updating the calendar. If you go to the calendar and you hit toggle type, you'll see links here, these blue little things, and it'll take you to all the videos that we have that are on YouTube for every single meeting. If there is not a recording, it says so. So you don't have to look for it because we don't have it. And that was either something didn't work or the speaker requested us not to record. So luckily tonight, Robert's going to allow us to record. So you'll find this meeting again at a later date. That looks better. Sorry, we're fixing the projector. It looks a little blurry. So that's the biggest change that you can find here. Just go to the calendar, hit toggle type, and it'll bring you to the historical calendar. And you'll find all the links. The other thing I want to talk about is every year, John Aniana loves us to do this World Pinhole Day. So we've decided that we are going to do a World Pinhole Day with John. It's on April 30th. We're going to meet in Allentown at a park. Starts with an H. I can't think of it at the top of my head right now, but I'm going to send an email out. If you're able to participate, that's great. We're going to meet him at 2 p.m. and we'll be there until you guys want to leave. It'll be the World Pinhole Day is rain or shine. However, it's going to be shine only for John to come out. So we'll probably still shoot there, but John will only come out if it's not raining, unfortunately. So if you'd like to participate, either just coming out and photographing with John, or if you want to try out pinhole, we have a pinhole cap for Canon, Nikon, and Sony available. Sony is what John owns, so we'll have to borrow his cap for a little bit, but we do have an extra Canon one floating around, and I have a Nikon one. So everybody has an option as long as you have those three cameras to try out the pinhole. And there's a little video here. Basically, the presentation that John had from last year is on there. You can watch it. It's on YouTube. And basically, you have until May 30th to upload the photo, and you upload it to this World Pinhole Day. They're also having a Zoom meeting coming up about their day. I'm not exactly sure what it's about, but yeah, so we're going to try to do that. I'll send an email out. It's going to be April 30th, 2 p.m. in Allentown, New Jersey. I don't know if Terry's on. Does he have anything for NGFCC? Let's see if I can find him here. You can unmute yourself, Terry, I think, if you're on. Melinda doesn't have anything. Go ahead, Terry.
You got it? I'll be getting the results of the nature and pictorial. They had the two events Monday, Tuesday this week. So probably toward the end of the week, I'll get the results. If anybody's won any ribbons or anything, once they send them to me, I'll send them out. I just want to point out to everybody, we had a little glitch, mostly due to me. I didn't realize that unlike our website where we can click on the link for the meeting 2 minutes before, when they do these pictorial and nature contests online, you gotta go through Eventbrite and they close it off 3 or 4 hours ahead, which I didn't realize. So I apologize if anybody couldn't get in. But if we do it in the future, just make sure when you're doing Eventbrite, you got to go 3 or 4 hours before the event. I think 4 o'clock is the cutoff, and you might have missed it. I apologize for that. I didn't know it. I thought you could go and get a link and click on it 5 minutes before, like I did tonight, but you can't do that. So that's about all. We're gonna, have a hiatus now with NJFCC until October. We won't have our fall event till fall pictorial and nature until October. So that's about it.
Thank you, Terry. Melinda doesn't have anything. We just got the PSA sent in, and they don't actually vote on them until 15th or 16th or something. So next meeting, hopefully we'll have results from that. And here's Valerie.
So before I get into tonight's great presentation, I'm going to tell you about May. We're going to have Chris Christoph. He's going to have a presentation about Eastern and Southern Africa. And he says this journey will explore the beauty and challenge of photography in the remote areas of Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa. I'm sorry, I need to make this bigger because I can't see. I need to go get my eyes checked. Rwanda, Uganda, it's all on the website, but he's going to take us where you can see all the typical animals that are in the areas of Africa and some that are rarely seen and can pose interesting photography issues. No special vaccinations are required for this adventure. And tonight we have Robert. Yay. Okay, gotta switch screens. Okay, so Robert grew up in the 70s in a small Bavarian town not far from the former East Germany and was then Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic. Why are you laughing at me? I'm trying to make this interesting. I gotta get everybody hyped up and ready. I'm your hype woman. You were always fascinated by the American landscape he saw in books, movies, and American TV shows. He bought his first camera, and what is this? ACFA? Okay, never heard of that one. It's a pocket camera when he saved up his money after delivering Sunday newspapers in the early 1980s. Coming to the US in 1990 as part of his job transfer, his first trip took him to New York City, where he bought his first SLR camera. In 2009, he made the jump to digital photography after attending a free Canon workshop in Acadia National Park and realizing that digital camera technology had many ways of surpassing traditional film. Since then, he has been photographing mostly landscapes and wildlife subjects. His day job as a registered dietitian for a large company allows him to travel to various parts of the United States every once in a while. And he also goes to places he wants to explore when he's working. So he's wink, wink working. He brings his gear with him and have additional vacation days, a day or two in front or behind, because, they cover the airfare. So that works. Most of his wildlife photography, he's like, none of that is on my website. Most of his wildlife photography shots are on his website and are taken in Central New Jersey. He said, to me, photography is a lifelong journey in which there is always room to discover something new and to grow. Most importantly, however, photography is something that should always be enjoyable. He said, over the past few years, he's been judging local camera club competitions, not ours, in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and has given presentations to many locations on landscape and wildlife photography. Some of the images may be featured in journals, calendars, and corporate or nonprofit websites over the years. So this presentation is Wildlife Photography 101. I'm sorry, I'm just changing my phone around. Caption wildlife photography is a popular genre of photography, and the affordability of long focal lenses by third-party manufacturers like Sigma and Tamron has opened wildlife photography to many more photography enthusiasts than ever before. Robert's presentation will take you on a journey to teach you everything you need to know to get started for photographing animals in their natural environment, covering how to find and get close to wildlife, camera gear and settings, and the best time to photograph animals in the wild, as well as a little bit of post-processing. And now here is Robert.
Turn it on. Turn the switch on. Do you want questions during?
We can wait until the end for questions. Probably that would be best. Valerie, I got another 3 pages for you to read. You didn't get it all yet. Who wrote all this stuff? Unbelievable. So thank you and welcome and to Wildlife 101. It's geared towards the 101 class, towards entry-level photographers who kind of like want to get out there a little bit more and photograph your furry or your feathered friends that are nearby or far away. And we'll talk about a bunch of things today. So before we get started, this little guy here, he kept me sane during year 1 of the pandemic. He was in my neighbor's yard with his family of like 6 others, mom and 5 siblings. And I would go out there into the Christmas tree farm where they had a den, and I would lie on my belly, the low angle shot, and I would just hang out for like 10 or 20 minutes. And if they didn't show up, I would come back 3 hours later or so. But the wildlife is fun to photograph, and we're lucky in New Jersey that we don't really have to go that far because Jersey is great for the bird migration that we get, and you can start photographing birds. We get all kinds of birds now. When I first moved to America in 1990, we had, I believe, 2 nesting pairs of bald eagles in New Jersey. And now we're at over 250. So I'm sure you've all seen bald eagles fly overhead these days, and there's nests everywhere now. And if you want to go out, you can find them to photograph them. I got a few pictures on here at the end, and from Conowingo Dam. Many of you have been down there. We'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, let me go forward. There we go. All right, so what we'll talk about today, let's talk a little bit about respecting wildlife and how we stay safe and keep them safe, right? When and where to photograph them, what's the best time to go out. Gear is always a popular topic because, gosh, there's no limit how much you can spend on gear. If you just go to B&H, to the website, you can just dump all your dollars in there, but you don't need the best and most expensive gear. Like my wildlife gear is by far not the most expensive out there. Talk a little bit about camera settings and what to do when you're out and about in the field. And then at the end, I'll show you some simple yet effective processing using mostly Lightroom and a couple of other programs, but Lightroom is what we focus on, and most people I think use Lightroom nowadays. That little fellow over here in the picture, and almost every picture I have in the presentation, I put the EXIF data on there, so you can just like follow along and say, okay, what was the focal length, and how fast was your speed, and what was your f-stop and your ISO, and did you crop it or not? So you can read along. I'm not going to read them off to you. But this little fella was in my neighbor's tree, and I was taking the garbage out, and 2 dogs were standing underneath the very, very large evergreen and looking up and continued to bark. And I said, hey, Griffin and Roger, what are you looking at? What you're barking? And I looked up, and the raccoon was in the tree. Yeah, so I got lucky having a raccoon in the tree during the daytime when I can actually see them. And I know I had time to go home, get my camera, because the raccoon wasn't going to come down anytime soon with the 2 dogs barking there. So I was able to get that shot of the little guy being trapped up on the tree. I joined an organization, and you don't have to pay any money for it, but they have a nice website where they talk about nature first photography and how basically we shouldn't leave any trace, and we shouldn't advertise. Like if we see a rare animal, like where the animal is, because then 100 people will show up and bother the animal and drive the animal away and things like that. So if you're interested in what they have on their website, it's an educational website, first and foremost. Check out naturefirstphotography.org. And we'll talk about staying safe, right? So every year, somewhere on the internet, you'll get notification that somebody was eaten out in Yellowstone by a bear, or somebody got hurt by trying to ride on the back of a bison. But it's actually not that common that people die. Most of the time people can get hurt. But what's the sad part is that like oftentimes the animal gets relocated or the animal gets shot when things like that happen. So just to let you know, like this bear here, this mama grizzly bear, I had to, yes, Valerie, I had to go out to Montana for work in May. And it was really rough for me to take off the weekend and drive down to Yellowstone and stay there for 3 nights. But May in Lamar Valley was great. There were only a lot of locals, let's say, a lot of people from Montana there with their spotting scopes, and they were looking at the wolves at that time. So it was easy for me to, drive up and down Lamar Valley on that road and see where people have the spotting scope set up. And there were 2 wolf packs. I don't have any good pictures of them. One on the left side of the road, one on the right side of the road, and they had 9 pups each, and people were just talking about it. So early May was a wonderful time. And this mama grizzly, I saw her for 2 days. The first day she just ate a bison calf, and there were a lot of photographers there and watchers with the scopes. But I had an 840 millimeter focal length on there, so a 600 millimeter lens and a teleconverter to get to 840. So I was far enough away, and there was a park ranger there, and there were like 20 cars parked on the road, right? So I'm not anywhere close to that grizzly bear, and I don't want to be. And the second day I saw the grizzly bear, when I arrived and all the cars were there, I'm like, oh, where is she? I don't see her. And she was just lying down in the sagebrush. There's all this stuff that you see on the screen here is sagebrush. Sometimes it's a little taller. It's like 3-4 feet tall. And she was lying down in there, and you could not see her. So if you ever think of hiking by yourself out in Montana, I would not recommend it in the summertime when those bears are around. And I like this picture, just one more slide on that topic. I like this picture that the National Park Service provided to people. So I actually looked it up. I went to the Yellowstone National Park Service website to see how many people get hurt there. And yes, a few people get hurt every year, but there's actually more people that get hurt from playing around in those hot springs and putting their feet in there or whatever, right? So not that many people actually get hurt by the wildlife, but it can happen, and you don't want to be the one. So generally speaking, we're pretty safe around wildlife. Like if you encounter a fox that doesn't have rabies, not many foxes have rabies. They're like curious about you, and then they take off, they run away. Bison is another story. A grizzly bear is another story. I saw 2 grizzly bears in Canada once, and on that trip I saw like 9 black bears. And the black bears were kind of like, hey, I'm just playing in the berry bushes here, minding my own business. You come a little close, I run away. But the 2 grizzlies I saw, they were like, hey, I'm determined. I'm moving forward. If you get in my way, you'll be dead. So again, generally, like we're pretty safe, even with coyotes and stuff like that. But the big animals, be cautious, right? Always follow the rules. Always listen to the park rangers, and don't feed them. Don't feed the wildlife. Just, I don't think anybody in here makes a living being a wildlife photographer. And don't kill yourself to get that shot. Leave the animal in peace. Stay a little further away and get yourself a longer lens. All right, when and where to photograph the wildlife. So these were all taken in Jersey, and like you can shoot wildlife in Jersey all year long. In February, I oftentimes go over to Mercer Meadows in Lawrenceville when the short-eared owls are out. This year was pretty lame. Not too many showed up. But like a couple of years ago, we had 6 out on the same afternoon in February, which was great. Ospreys are coming back. They're down the shore. Sandy Hook has a lot of them flying around. There's an old wharf in Oceanport where they go fishing right in front of you. It's pretty crowded with photographers in the evenings right now. Springtime, you may see a fox. Maybe you get lucky and you hear about a fox then nearby and you can photograph them. July and August, I head down to the shore in Point Pleasant Beach. They rope off an area. They rope off 2 areas last year for nesting shorebirds. So like come August, I'm going to go down there and photograph skimmer chicks and the least terns there. And that's always fun. And I go for an hour in the morning. I'll be there for sunrise. Then I get breakfast. Then I'll be home by 9. And then, just in your backyard, you got chipmunks and squirrels all year long. So you don't have to go out to Yellowstone or somewhere to photograph wildlife because we have it in Jersey, which is great. Yeah.
So in June, first week of June, the porky crabs start coming up to lay their eggs on the beaches.
Yeah. Which beach? Yeah, so the horseshoe crabs are coming in June, you say? And there's which beach is that? Which beach?
Down the South Jersey, along the Delaware.
Okay.
On the Delaware side. They come up by the hundred.
Oh yeah, we should do a field trip. Okay, cool. So just like landscape photography, it's kind of fun to photograph those guys in the morning when you have that nice warm light coming from the side, and many times in the morning and in the evening, the animals become more active. They wake up, kind of like us. They're hungry. They want to do stuff. They want to get some food, so they're moving out and about. And the same at nighttime, they get a little snack before they go to bed and they're out and about, right? So the one on the left that was up at the State Line Lookout, it's this parking lot on the Palisades Parkway, right between the George Washington Bridge and the old Tappan Zee Bridge, like halfway up. So 10 minutes north of the George Washington Bridge. And there's this pair of peregrine falcons there all year long. And then you go up there in the summertime, you may see their young ones flying with them, and you may have 4 peregrine falcons flying around. And the buck there, he was just in the soybeans out here in Cranbury in the field in the evening. So if you go out the library during sunset, you may see some of those in the field in the summertime too. Now the advantage is we have the wonderful light coming from the side. The animals are more active, but getting a good picture can get a little challenging, especially when it's still kind of dark, right? Because we all know that, like, okay, it's dark outside. How do I get a better exposure? What do I do? I can slow down the exposure time, but then the animal will be blurry. I can up my ISO speed, but then the image will be grainy, right? So there's limitations to that, and it can be a little challenging. But oftentimes when the sun comes up, you have maybe half an hour or 45 minutes where you can take beautiful pictures in great light. Where should we go when we are talking about New Jersey birds? A place for you to start is to go on ebird.org, which is the Cornell Lab website. And you can just click on Explore on the website, and you can learn about where the birds are near where you live, what birds are migrating. You can sign up for a rare bird alert in case a rare bird shows up in your neighborhood. And if you've never been on that site, I encourage you to go to ebird.org because it's a great site for birding, and you can learn about all kinds of stuff that relates to New Jersey birds. Sometimes, like once or twice a year, go down to Island Beach State Park. On the bay side, there's a couple of blinds you can go to and see some wading shorebirds. But it's a nice place to explore and see something different, like snowy egrets and other wading birds. And it's not that far. It's like an hour, 15 minutes from here. And in New Jersey, Audubon also has a nice website for you to go to and learn about New Jersey birds and where they are. Many people go down to Forsyth in South Jersey. It's just north of Atlantic City. You see Atlantic City in the distance. It's an 8-mile wildlife drive. You can find all kinds of birds down there all year long. So look at those sites. So I live here. I live across the field there, exit 8A in New Jersey, right? So where do I go? I couple times a year go up to State Line Lookout, where the peregrine falcons hang out all year long. I go to Mercer Meadows or Pole Farm in Lawrenceville. I mentioned that already, for their short-eared owls, and there's northern harriers there, which are kind of fun to watch and photograph. Mercer County Park, they often have eagles. They have a nesting pair of eagles there, so if you get lucky, you can catch them fishing. Point Pleasant Beach, I go there for the little shorebirds in July and August. Island Beach State Park, there's always something interesting going on there with the birds, and right now they have good-looking foxes again. There's like 3-4 foxes there at least running around, and none of them have mange yet. So you can see a good fox with a good fur. Ocean City. Has anybody been to Ocean City in the summertime? They have a rookery there, and they have all kinds of birds. You feel like you enter a Jurassic Park movie when you get out of the car. Because you have these glossy ibises there, you have night herons there, and they all make a lot of noise. And if you go in July, a lot of them have little babies. And the fun part about the Ocean City is that there's this pullout, there's this nature center or whatever it is, with a parking lot right in the middle of the bridge. So you pull out there, and you get out of your car, and the birds are there. You look down into this rookery, and you see all the nests that they have, and you see the eggs in the nest and the little ones begging for food. It's a great place to go to. Best time of the day, again, at sunrise. So you have to leave here at, I don't know, 4:30 maybe, to be there on time for the good light. And then Conowingo Dam. Francisco just came back from Conowingo Dam today again. Conowingo Dam is usually really good, like in November and April. It's about 2.5 hours from here in Maryland. If you want to leave New Jersey and go somewhere else, I mentioned the Lamar Valley in Yellowstone earlier. Some websites refer to it as the North America Serengeti. And when I went there in May, I contemplated to hire a guide to take me out to all the secret places where the wildlife hangs out. But I tell you what, not needed, because all you have to do is drive the road back and forth a couple times a day. And whenever there's a car pulled over, there's an animal there. And then somebody will tell you, hey, did you go over there yet? There's a grizzly with a cub. And then you drive there to see if you see the grizzly and the cub. One time I was down in Florida, Florida's Black Point Wildlife Drive. It's right near Cape Canaveral. It's a fantastic wildlife drive. We see all kinds of birds that we don't have up here. My wife went to the Galapagos Islands without me. And the fun part, so she says, was that you just take photos without a long lens, just whatever little camera you can bring, because the animal is like right there, like a few feet in front of you, and they're not afraid of you. They don't run away. And she highly recommends that. So if you ever want to do a trip of your lifetime, she totally enjoyed going to the Galapagos. You can go to Colombia for some birds. If you know anybody from Colombia in this club, you can talk to him. He probably has like 3 trips a year going on now to Colombia, the way he goes. So Francisco will take you and photograph the most amazing birds in Colombia. And I think the Camera Club should have a bird competition one time, so we can see all of those wonderful entries from Valerie and Melanie, Melinda and Francisco and everybody. And many other places I'm not familiar with. So people go to Costa Rica, people go to other wonderful places. So sometimes I enter images to a competition, and one time I had a judge who looked at my bird photo, which was a nice bird photo. And he said, yeah, the bird's not doing anything. 6. I'm like, oh man, it was a perfect photo. Come on, the light was gorgeous. And he has a point, like if you can capture an animal doing something interesting other than just sitting there or standing there, if they interact with another animal, like that's awesome, that's great. If they eat something, whatever they do, as long as they do something, that's oftentimes a much more impactful picture. Like if you go and shoot the eagles down at the dam, Conowingo Dam, you kind of want to catch them grabbing a fish out of the water, and they do something, right? Instead of just sitting on a tree. So that one again was taken down the Jersey Shore in Point Pleasant. And those are the skimmers. And they were feeding the little one. And I was on my belly, and I'll show you my tripod that I have to lie on my belly. And I bring a really nice towel where the sand just flies off when I shake it. Now, the thing with those birds is like, you got to be ready. Like when they land with that fish, it takes like 2 seconds and the fish is gone because the little one just runs over, grabs it and eats it. So you kind of have to be ready for that. But the nice part is that whole feeding thing goes on all morning long. And we usually, again, just stay there for like 45 minutes while the light is really nice and soft and from the side like that. And then it gets too bright, and then we'll usually get pancakes and coffee and call it a day. Oftentimes when you capture a mammal like a fox or like the grizzly bear, they don't swallow their prey whole like the birds do. So they tend to be slower eaters and may have a little more time photographing them if you see them in the wild. Okay, let's talk about gear. So let's talk about cameras and lenses and teleconverters and support and all this stuff, what we need in the field. And the bad news is that it can get really expensive with wildlife photography, because you've seen those people, those wildlife photographers with those big giant lenses standing around, and those big giant lenses may set you back quite a bit. But it doesn't have to be, and we'll get into that when we talk about the lenses. About cameras nowadays. So Canon and Nikon and Sony and probably the other companies too, they come out with these new mirrorless cameras. And probably over the last two and a half years now, they put something in those cameras called eye detection, where the camera sensor will detect the eye of the animal. And then it will lock onto that, and it will stay focused on that. And then whenever you take a picture, almost all of them come out very sharp, and you have the eye of the animal in focus, which is what we want. The older cameras don't do that, unfortunately. And I have the Canon R5, which I bought almost 2 years ago. And I probably keep 85% of the pictures, because, I mean, I don't keep them, but they're keepers in terms of sharpness, because the eye is sharp, the head is sharp of the animal, everything is beautifully in focus. With my previous camera, which was a good camera from Canon, it was a wildlife camera from Canon, but it didn't have that eye detection in there. I probably threw out 80% of the pictures because I missed that focus, even though I tried really hard. It's just amazing what the technology has done in that area over the last 2 years. And these new cameras, they have a very fast autofocus. Many of them are full frame cameras, meaning you have a bigger sensor in there, meaning you get a higher quality image. And they're expensive. However, over the last year, Canon and Nikon too, they come out with the camera gear that's more geared towards entry level, that are cheaper, and they put in that same technology in those cameras. So if you're in the market for a new camera, and you have time to read some reviews and you want to wait till Christmas time, you can probably buy an entry-level camera or like a moderately priced one that can give you the same type of technology to get better animal pictures than with the older gear. Now the zoom lenses. So you can buy a wildlife zoom lens. Many of you, I think, over the last couple of years bought one. Popular ones are usually like 150 to 600 millimeter in focal length, which will start below $1,000. And that picture there on the right side, that's my lens that I have. I have a Sigma 60 to 600 lens, which cost me about $2,000. And because the mount is for the older type cameras, it's not for the mirrorless camera, and you have to use an adapter. And I saw that B&H had it for a one-day sale at like $1,200 reduced. So I assume it will be on sale again sometime in the future. But it's a nice lens. It's more weather sealed, and $2,000 I was able to handle. But again, the model I had before was a 150 to 600. It cost me $1,000, and it took great photos. Now, the advantage of a zoom lens is that you have more versatility, right? Like I can zoom back and I can zoom in on the animal. I have that flexibility. One time I was over at Mercer Meadows, and I talked to a couple guys from Pennsylvania, and they had a fixed lens. They didn't have that zoom lens. They couldn't zoom back and forth with it. So it was like fixed. And if you ever look through a 600 millimeter lens, it's like looking through binoculars. And when you look through binoculars, sometimes whatever you want to look at, you kind of have to like search for it and find it, right? Because it sometimes takes a little bit because you cannot zoom. And they were walking up in the park, and there was a northern harrier, which is a cool bird. And there was a red-shouldered hawk, which is also a cool bird. And the two birds right in front of them got into an aerial battle. And I was standing somewhere else, and we looked at them. I'm like, oh man, they were right there. They must have gotten a great shot of them right there, right up close. And I saw them later again, and they couldn't. They didn't have the shot. They couldn't get it because they were like, they were like with the big lens. They were like moving all the way around, and they couldn't get the shot because they cannot zoom. So zoom lenses are great for that reason. We have that flexibility. Now, if you look at the image on the left side, that peregrine falcon, look at the focal length there. I took that at 437 millimeter. And sometimes the birds is like right in front of you over the cliffs on a tree branch. And I was able to, and it's not cropped, I was able to get right up there and zoom in to fill my frame. There was nobody standing next to me with a $20,000 lens because that would have been too close for them with a 600 or 800 millimeter lens. They were way back and they couldn't get that particular angle. So zoom lenses, I prefer them. They're lighter, they're more versatile, and they're cheaper. Now, if you want to buy a fixed prime lens, yes, the image quality gets better. But depending on the lens you're going to buy, you can spend for a new lens between, anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000. And people who have that lens, they're probably all professionals, or they just wanted a bigger and better lens and they were able to afford it, right? But for my purpose, I don't see using that. Now, it would be nice to have one if somebody has a Canon lens for me, a 600 f4, 800 f4, and they want to get rid of it and just give it to me because I did a great job presenting tonight, I'll take it. But other than that, it's just pretty cost prohibitive. And then the other thing that sometimes people talk about are teleconverters. And maybe you're out there shooting and there's other photographers that and say, hey, you got a 2.0 tele on there, you got a 1.4 tele on there. And what a teleconverter does, it's another piece of glass, like I have in the picture up there, that you put between the lens and your camera. And it will give you more magnification. So my 600 millimeter lens that I have, I put a 1.4 teleconverter on there. So 600 times 1.4 gives me a 840 millimeter focal length. So I can get closer to the animal, right? But the problem with that is that, yes, it is cheaper than a more expensive lens, right? And for me, it's fun to get closer to the animal this way, like looking through better binoculars. But what happens is, because of that extra piece of glass, now my camera sensor is not getting all that light anymore that I want to go to the camera sensor. So it reduces the light by 1 or 2 stops, depending on the filter, on the converter. And it may affect how fast you can focus and how well you can focus. So some people like him, some people use him, some people don't use him. And I don't feel there's a good consensus out there, right? Some people say, well, I got a big megapixel camera. I don't use a teleconverter. If I want to get close to the animal, I just zoom in and crop at home on the computer. So I think it's up to you if you want to buy one. For me, it's more fun just to get closer to the animal. That's why I have one. But I don't think there's a good answer as to buy one or not. Important stuff now is the camera supports. All of you, I think, or most of you will have a tripod. You use the tripod already, maybe for landscape photography. But it's also good to support your camera and your heavy lens when you have, when you want to shoot those animals, because holding up a big lens and waiting for that animal to do something, sometimes it can take a while. So a tripod is a good support for a big lens and your camera. Sometimes people want to just carry a monopod, and it certainly is a lot lighter. It probably only weighs a third of a tripod. It's easier to get around with, and it's easier to be in tight spaces. If you have in a tight space and you don't have room for a tripod, then maybe you just bring a monopod along. However, with a monopod, sometimes we stand there for like an hour or two, waiting for that animal to show up or do something. With a monopod, you kind of have to hold it all the time. So that's kind of like a bummer a little bit. With a tripod, you can, just have it sit there with the camera. You don't have to hold on to it. But a monopod, if you let go, it will fall over. And then you break your camera, and then you're sad. So I prefer a tripod over that. And then there's other support options. There's a ground pod or a beanbag. Sometimes people use that for the car. They roll down the window and they put a beanbag over the door and to rest the camera when they want to shoot birds from their car, like when they watch a bird feeder that's been put up near a road. And then on the right side down there, that's my Frisbee that I have, and I finagled something for my camera to sit on a ball head, and that's what I use down the beach. I got my blanket, I got my. It's a good Frisbee. It cost me $15. None of the cheap stuff that you get from the bank for free, right? Because it got to be sturdy, and the good thing about that is that it keeps the sand out too. Right, you have a little bit of protection to keep your equipment clean, and the sand doesn't get into everything. And you can buy, I guess, from B&H, they sell you something that looks like a frying pan with an adapter on there, and it will cost you like $150 from B&H. So the Frisbee was a better option for me. Now, when we talk about the top of the tripod, we have a head on there, right? And for landscape photography, many people have a ball head. And the ball head is fine, right? You can focus on, you can focus on a bird's nest. You can focus on the fox den with a ball head, right? And you can tighten it down, and then you can always have your animals there when they emerge and you want to take your photo. But it doesn't move really like a gimbal head would. And gimbal head's a little more pricey, yes. But the way with the gimbal, I can position my camera and my lens in a way that it basically just sits there. And whenever an animal moves, I can move it up and down, left and right, and it's totally effortless. So that's a nice investment, especially when you want to capture birds in flight, like down at Wingo, when you have those eagles, there's like dozens of eagles there in November, and you want to capture them fishing, then you can follow them quite easily with a gimbal head. And again, with everything camera related, you can probably buy a really nice gimbal head for $100, and you can buy one for $900. And there's really good ones in every price range. And it's just, what is your budget and what are your needs, and then look at some reviews, what to get. All right, that's another one of my little friends that I had in 2020. And or in 21, it was the second year. Yeah, second year of the pandemic, 21. And with the cameras, what I want to focus on, like where do we focus with the animal? Like it's always the eye. You want to get that eye in focus. And I took that one with my old camera, and because the guy wasn't moving very fast, I manually basically adjusted to get my focal point over the eyeball, because he was sitting there for a little while smiling at me as long as I didn't move fast. But the new camera will just lock onto that. It will just track that eye, lock onto that, and it will be great and in focus. And this is what it would look like basically on the back of my screen or through my electronic viewfinder, and I would just see a little rectangle. And if the bird moves or the animal moves, that rectangle will just follow the eye and stay on it. For all the cameras, what we used before, like what I used like 3 years ago, was called the back button focus. And if you have an older model camera, I would urge you to just type in your model number into Google and use the word back button focus. We use those words in the search engine and see if somebody created a YouTube video to explain to you how to set that up. Many of you remember when you take a photo, you hit the front of your camera, you hit that shutter button halfway down and it focuses, and then you push it all the way down and it takes the picture, right? Now for a bird that moves really fast, that's kind of hard to do. Like you have to always like try to push it halfway down, focus, push it all the way down, click it, take the picture, the bird is already gone. So what back button focus does is like a button in the back of your camera that you designate, and you push and hold that button, and the camera just keeps focusing on whatever you have to focus at. So if on the picture, if I set my focus range to the middle of the image frame, my camera, as long as I have my thumb on there, on that particular button that I set, it will just continuously focus on whatever is moving in the center of my frame. And then I just use that front button just to keep shooting. And I can set up my camera up. I push the button down and it just keep continuously shooting like 7-10 frames a second sometimes, right? Whatever you set up with the old camera. New cameras, you don't have to worry about that anymore. But if you want to learn something about the old camera for taking wildlife photos and a lot in a row, look up back button focus in your model. Okay, so this guy, I was there with Francisco in November, down at Wingo Dam. And actually we stood there for like 3 hours and it was cold in the morning. And I'm like, I'm done now, Francisco. I would say, Francisco, listen, I'm done. I got to go home. I'm getting cold. Nothing is happening here. But you know, when I leave, things will start to happen. So I left. And then all of a sudden those birds started fishing. So I took this one from like up in the parking lot. I'm like, oh, damn, now they're fishing like crazy. So I ran back and I got that shot. At least I got a couple that day, right? So for that shot, again, yeah, it's a nice bald eagle, got a little tiny fish in its beak. And I shot it really fast, like, because now we're going to talk about camera settings, right? I shot that one really fast at 3,200th of a second to freeze that action, to get like that bird really sharp while he's flying. But what I want to talk about here is like, don't blow out the whites. And with like egrets and other birds that have like a white head, it's really easy to just blow out those whites and have a picture when you come home where there's just no detail left, because you know, just the head is just a plain white, like a sheet of paper, and there's just no feathers you can see anymore. So when you go out, and again, you can check your camera and you can see, hey, for my camera model, how do I set up my blinkies? Meaning, if anything is blown out, when you look in the back of your camera, you do a review of your image, something will start blinking. And also the blinkies. Or if you have a histogram, like I show you here in the picture, if that graph, all these, you know, these mountains and valleys that you see in the graph here, if that touches the right side of that graph, if it goes all the way to the right side, that means I have some whites that are blown out. So I never want to touch that right side. So with my camera, I can see this histogram on the back of my camera. And I would take some test shots when I photograph the birds. I'm like, okay, the bird is down there. This is the light we have. What are my settings so I don't blow out those whites? And then hopefully I come home and I have good detail in the birds throughout. So everybody knows those three terms, I think. Everybody knows the aperture, which is like how wide open is my lens, how much light to get in. And the wider open it is, the lower the number, right? So if I can shoot at f4, then my background will be nice and blurry versus f11, right? So like for wildlife, we want that background nice and blurry. So if I can shoot f4 or even f2.8 with a more expensive lens, let's do that. That would be good. For shutter speed, like, all right, I wanna use a fast shutter speed because I want that action to be frozen. I want a sharp image of that animal. And the animal doesn't stay still most of the time. They're moving or they're doing something. It's not like a birthday party where you say, everybody just hold still, right? So fast shutter speed is good. And then I want to shoot at a very low ISO to avoid this noise. And sometimes the judges will tell you, that picture is noisy. That image is noisy. You got to fix that. But sometimes it's just not so easy to shoot at a low ISO because we mentioned earlier, during the morning light, during the late afternoon light, it's getting dark. I want a fast shutter speed. What do? I need to up my ISO, and then it gets noisy. But we'll talk about that a little bit. It's easier said than done, right? To get all those settings right. So let's look at this aperture thing. So with my lens that I had when I shot those great blue herons in West Windsor, we had a rookery for a short while before the spring storm came and knocked down those nesting sites. That was the widest open I can shoot with my lens, f6.3. But you can see that, the image, the background is getting like a little blurry. It's kind of like pleasing. I have the foreground that's nice and sharp with those birds in it. And f6.3, the trees in the background, they're blurry enough for me to make this image work. Now, if I step that down to f11 or f18 or f16, all those trees in the background would be sharp too, and I didn't want that. So I shot it wide open, f6.3, the widest I can get. And I had to put a cicada into my wildlife presentation because we live near Princeton, and last year was good for cicadas. If you like them or not, you go to Princeton, you get millions of them around. But I just wanted to show you, like with my macro lens, right? f2.8, that cicada was on a piece of grass or a little flower there, and right under its feet, it was getting blurry. So the more wide open, the lower your f-stop is, the lower the number is, the more blurry of a background you can probably expect. Talk about shutter speed. How fast do I need to be, right, when I shoot animals? Plains Preserve, I saw this tree swallow sit in a tree while I was walking on the main trail, and looked like a hunchback. I'm like, oh, he looks like he has a hunchback. So I'm gonna take a picture of him. And I handheld my camera, 600 millimeter. I set it up to 1,000th of a second, and it was really nice and sharp. It worked out well for a handheld photo. But then another time I wanted to get a tree swallow that was flying, and I wanted to freeze that wing action. And I had to shoot that at 1/4000th of a second, right? So yeah, think about that. Like, what do you want to shoot? Do you want to shoot a bird that is sitting there? You want to shoot a bird in flight? And how fast does my shutter speed need to be to freeze that action? One time, a couple of years ago, we had a lot of bald eagles over in Mercer Lake because all the lakes up north froze over, and they went fishing there. And I got out of my car and I walked down there, and there was this young bald eagle fishing right in front of me. And I picked up my camera and I took a picture of it, and it was right in front of me. And then I came home and I looked at it, and it was terrible because I didn't have time to set up my shutter speed, and it was like shot at like 1/100th of a second, and that wasn't cutting it for an eagle in flight. So I'm still bummed out about that because I never got as close to another eagle like that. But I keep trying. Okay, talk about this ISO thing. And I looked it up what it means. It's like International Standards of something. It's like a technical term that's like ancient. What does ISO even mean, right? But many of you remember in the old days, we would go to the store and we would buy film with an ISO rating on it. And we say, it's sunny outside. I want to take a family vacation photo, and I buy an ISO 100 film. And then maybe you want to be inside the house for a birthday party, and it's kind of like dark. You want to take pictures of the birthday cake, and you bought an ISO 1600 film. And it's kind of like the same idea, right? The higher the ISO, the more my camera kind of like works with the available light and kind of like amplifies it. And then the technology, like it kind of like introduces some graininess into the whole picture. And the high ISO works great for darker areas, but then it gets that noise. And up until like 2 years ago, it was really hard to get rid of that noise in the image. And if you look at that eagle photo here, like I zoomed in, you kind of can see a bunch of that noise. But nowadays, thank goodness, we have a bunch of software programs. And the one that many people use is called topaz denoise. And what I do with my eagle photo or any other wildlife photo nowadays, I'll just open it up in denoise and I let it do its thing and I click a button and it cleans up my image. So this whole noise thing can be reduced, can be gone with just the software click. It does a good job. It doesn't do a perfect job, but it's a lot better than what it was before. Okay, in the field. So remember, we focus on the eyeball, right? So a low angle would be great. Like if I could shoot all my animals eye level, you know, that would be awesome. But I can try, right? So I can try sometimes. And my little fox friend there on the left, again, you know, I was like down on the ground. I was like eye level with that fox cub. I was probably even below eye level this time, but he was looking up. So it gives me like this cool angle there. And because of the angle, like you look past the fox in the left picture and like you have like this nice fall of it, like you have like this pleasing background where it gets all blurry really quickly, which is nice, right? Now, the one on the right side, that was in Lamar Valley again in early May, you know, parts of it still had snow. And fox was walking with a vole in its mouth on the street. And I was driving, so I didn't have time to get out of my car and say, hey, listen, wait up, fox, can you just stop, hold it, strike a pose, right? So I just rolled down my window, took my camera and took a quick snapshot of the fox, right? And I'm like shooting down, like down from the car, kind of like into the ground almost. And I don't get the same kind of pleasing background when I shoot that way. I still have a nice image. I still like it because it shows like what's going on there in the park. But it doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't have that same type of quality. So whenever you can shoot at a low angle, I would say do it. And if you have a hard time getting up, then bring a younger friend with you who can give you a hand. Just saying. Yeah. We have a question if I ever shoot auto. I never shoot auto anymore. I guess if you have enough lights out there, maybe you want to shoot an aperture priority because then you can open up your lens to its widest setting and you can get like a more blurry background, right? Or if you want to freeze action and there's like some fast action going on with, you know, tree swallows or eagles, maybe you want to set the shutter speed priority and say, okay, I'm going to shoot at 1/2000th of a second, see how they come out, see if I like it, or maybe I have to shoot faster or not. But many times the light is not that great and I'm like, okay, I'll go into manual setting, I'll deal with it myself. Now, one setting that many cameras have, you know, you select your aperture, how wide your lens is open, you select your shutter speed, and then you can select the camera and say, you pick that ISO. Camera, you figure it out, you pick that ISO, and if the ISO comes out really high, I have the topaz denoise, I can fix that afterwards. So that works too. Huh? A break? No, I'm almost done, man. Now, okay, I have a spot. Give me 2 more slides and then we'll have a break and then we'll finish up and do a Q&A. I didn't know that you do breaks today. No, I do a break. So in the field, blending in is sometimes like a really fun thing to do, right? So you can, if you're out in the field, you sometimes see people all dressed up in camouflage, right? And I don't know if that's always needed. Like if I go down to Conowingo Dam and the eagles are fishing out in the river, They don't care if I look like a tree, right? There's cars in the parking lot, there's asphalt there, there's a dam there, there's cars driving by. I don't need it there. But sometimes when you're out in the woods and you want to sneak up on like an animal den or something because you know they're there, then it makes more sense if you're like the only photographer out there. And there's a company, I think it's an English company, that Dragopans. They have a really nice website too, photographyblinds.com. You can go there, where they give you some tips and tricks on how to shoot wildlife too. And I have the tent that's in the background there. I ordered that after I had the fox den, in hopes that the fox den would be there again the next year, which it wasn't. So, so I have an unused tent at home for the last 2 years. But at least I have it in case the foxes return. Or coyotes, we got coyotes in Cranbury now. So if somebody, Greg, where's the coyote den? Tell me, I'm gonna go there with my tent. But it's not so hard to like even set up something in your home, right? And if you want to, people at home and people here, you can scan that QR code with your phone if you know how that one works. Holding up the phone, putting on the camera, and then tapping that little dinosaur QR code. It takes you to a nice website, nice article that was posted on shuttermuse.com on a backyard setup. And I got something set up at home now. I got my feeders hanging there. I put some pieces of wood out there. I put some evergreen branches up, and I'm getting the hang of it. It's kind of fun. So I'll sit back with a glass of wine at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and take some pictures of our birds the last 3 days. Kind of fun to do an experiment. But the article is really nice on shuttermuse.com, and you can scan that QR code and get there. And I think that's the last slide before the break. If you can, try changing your position to improve the background. And this was the world famous eastern screech owl from down the shore this year in Barnegat Township that attracted way too many visitors. And then people's like, we had enough. We're closing off the whole like trail area, so nobody can visit this eastern screech owl anymore. I went twice during the morning, and there were like 2, maybe 3 photographers there. And then in the evenings, even during the week, there were like 20 people there. And there was a small tree, and that's a small owl. And I heard what broke the camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back, was that people walked up to the tree when the owl was in there and knocked on the tree. They hammered on the tree. So going back to an earlier slide where we're saying, respect nature, respect the owl and everything, get a long lens, stay far away. But what I wanted to talk about here is like, look at the background. So I got 3 images here, 1, 2, 3. And you can see that first image here, I got the stick in the background that's coming right towards the owl. So a judge may say, that's no good. I don't like that. So the second one, it got a little better, but now I got that. I marked that. Here's the little tree, and for the second one, now I got that big old tree in the back there, that big dark tree in the back that they cannot fix. And for the third one, that little stick, I can clone that out, but there's nothing else in the background that's distracting anymore. So I got this nice bouquet in the background, and then I put it into my software. I edited it a little bit more, and that's my little owl friend that I got. And then now we'll take a break, and then we'll talk about the digital darkroom a little bit more for like another 15 minutes. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'll put a timer up, and then we'll be back in a minute.
Did you go down to see the little owl friend?
No,
No.
Before we start up, Rose has something that we forgot to mention earlier, so she's going to tell us about it.
Getting there. Okay, so White's Bog, which is located over in Browns Mills, is hosting a spring photo contest. The photos must be taken this year in the months of April and May. You can email them. I put the information in the chat, but their email is whitesbogevents@gmail.com. There's going to be prizes, which include general store gift cards, a copy of the new White's Bog book, and family membership. I also gave you the link to the site so you can check it out. Looks like a cool little area for preservation. So there's some opportunities for us to get some workout.
And you'll email that for the guys that are here in person, correct?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Again, okay. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's talk a little bit about this whole your digital darkroom at home. When you come home with an image from your trip. So let's say you come home with this eagle image from Conowingo Dam. Probably just an eagle flyby, and you're like, oh man, I saw that eagle flying. It was so much fun, and now I come home and it got like a little tiny eagle on a big photo, big image. That doesn't look very impressive. But in the digital darkroom, we can do so much with it. We can probably do something to make it a little more exciting. About my EXIF data there on the bottom, the focal length, right? I have my 600mm lens on there with my teleconverter giving me 840mm. I got a good reach, like a binoculars almost. A really fast shutter speed. Freeze that eagle in action. F9, that's as wide open as I can shoot when I have the teleconverter on my lens, because I lose some light. I cannot, my camera doesn't go to f4 or f6.3 anymore. My lens, just f9 is all I can do. And I have that ISO of 2500, which seems kind of high. So there's probably some noise in that image as well. So what do? I import my picture. My image is a raw file. I always shoot raw. And you probably heard that, you always should shoot raw because you have a bigger file, you get more information in there instead of JPEG. I'll import it and I'll crop it. And in Lightroom, if you use Lightroom, whenever you crop something and you've never done it before, try to hit the L key on your keyboard. And the L key basically turns off the lights. It like blocks all these controls that you have. And if you have a grid on it, this is what your screen will look like. You can then resize it, you can move it around, and you can get a better idea of what your image will look like when it's cropped. And I can turn on these grid lines that give me like the rule of thirds, and I can like say, okay, I'm put my eagle a little bit to the left of center, give the eagle a little bit of room on the right side to fly into, to make it a little bit more pleasing. And with my camera, remember earlier we talked about the new cameras that are coming out. With my camera, I got 45 megapixels. So when I crop it like that, it's still a fairly large size. And I don't lose that much image quality, right? So I crop it to that. Then we had this noise problem. And here on the left side, you can see the noise. If you look in the water, or if you look at the eyeball of the bird or the feathers, you can see that little graininess on the left side. Again, I just put it into the denoise program. Sometimes I adjust the sliders a little bit, but oftentimes I just go with the default setting, and it cleans up my image with basically a click of your mouse. And then what do? Then I'm going to say, hey, and everybody here is like, why is the eagle green now? In Lightroom and in Photoshop, but in Lightroom, there's masking tools. Like I can mask that eagle. And Lightroom updated their program last October. And now, like, all I have to do is I open my photo and I say, hey, Lightroom, and I click a button that says select subject, and it selects the eagle. And now when I edit something, when I play with my exposure or my contrast or my colors, it will just do that for the eagle and not for the background, right? And that wasn't the case before, like editing programs 3, 4, 5 years ago, they weren't doing that. Now I can just click select subject. And there's other ways to select whatever you want to select, but that's an easy one for an eagle because the software knows, hey, that's an eagle, I'm going to select the eagle. And it does a pretty good job, but it's not perfect. And if you just, a side note, if you use Lightroom or Photoshop, there's this guy out there called Matt Kosklowski, I think, but this website is mattkay.com. And he always, whenever there's an update to Lightroom and they put new features in, he always comes out with a video that's free, like 2 days later, where he talks about the new feature. So you can learn as these programs develop, as these programs add new features. You can subscribe to his YouTube channel and you can learn from what he tells you. So I learned about these masking tools that they added in October from his videos. But back to the bird. So I masked the bird and I said, hey, it's pretty good, but it's not perfect. And by that, I mean, it didn't do a good job selecting between the feathers. And I switched on a different view here. And if you look between the wing feathers, right, you can see some white there or some bright areas. And that is the water in the background. So I wanted to select only the bird, but it did select more than just the bird. It selected all that area between the feathers. And I want to fix that. So with those Lightroom tools, now I zoomed into that feather there. So with those Lightroom tools, I can now go in there with a brush or any other, there's several ways to do that. And I want to clean up this white area and say, hey, I don't want that white area selected. That's the water in the background. And I can clean it up. And then after adjusting the image to what I want it to be, this is what the eagle looks like now. I played with the shadows a little bit. I brought up the dark areas. I toned down the bright areas. Probably the head was a little bright, so I toned that down a little bit. I played with the saturation a little bit, make that beak and those feet a little more yellow maybe. Make it pop a little bit more. So the bird looks good now to me. And then sometimes I look at the image, I'm like, okay, the bird looks good, but maybe I don't like the background that much. Maybe I don't like the way the water looks that much. Kind of like gray and dull. So I can select the bird again in the software. And then I say to Lightroom, I say, okay, you select the bird now, but let's reverse it. Let's select everything but the bird. And when I do that, now just the water is selected. When I do that, then I can play with the background and the water a little bit. And when I finish up my image at home, like so everything was done in Lightroom now and denoise. And sometimes I do a little bit of work in Photoshop where I want to get rid of like some of the, some distractions in the image. I like to use Photoshop for that. I also use an older program called Nick, which was 10 years ago. It was a free program developed by Google, and now you have to pay for it, but it has a lot of nice features that you can play around with. Like if I want to do a black and white photo, I always use one of the Nick programs to do that. But in this image, I made the water already a little more blurry. And with Photoshop and the Nick program, I'm going to put my finishing touches on it. And then this is what my final image would look like. Now, again, it's probably not the most exciting image because the bird doesn't do anything but fly. It's more fun when they catch a fish or do something with it. But when I look at the beginning image that we had, going from here to there, with basically just a few clicks in the software program, it does take time. You need to practice a little bit and play around with it and see what you like and what you don't like when you move those sliders. It's an improvement. Like you come home from Conowingo Dam and they show your family, say, hey, I got this eagle. And they're like, wow, that was kind of far away. But then you edit it and you're like, wow, you got that close to an eagle. And you tell them, yeah, I got that close to an eagle. It flew right by my head. Next time you should come with me instead of me driving 2.5 hours by myself. So you can do that. So you can edit, and again, I would encourage you, if you want to learn the software that you have at home, if it's Lightroom or anything else, look up some YouTube videos. Find somebody that has a whole series of videos teaching you how to do the software that you like, that you say like, hey, that video is pretty good. I like the way they teach that. And then, watch those short videos and work on it. Yes. How to make it larger? I cropped it. You crop it. You know how to crop it. The eagle gets bigger after you crop it. So just to wrap things up, so I have a website. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. It's too much of a time suck for me. I don't get anything done when I'm on those sites. So I just have a website, few images on there. And I'm going with Francisco in November to Iceland, and we're taking a few people with us. So if you have any interest in coming along, you can talk to Francisco and me after today, or you can just visit my website and read all about it. It's what do we do, Francisco? 8 days, 7 nights in Iceland. We feed you, we have lodging included, and we'll take you out to all those fun places where it's like really cold in November. Lots of ice, lots of waterfalls, and hopefully those northern lights, which are happening tonight again. They just happen like every night now these days, because solar activity is still going up for the next 2 years, and it's just a good time to try to see them. And that is really all I have for you today. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any questions. Yes. We have a question here about selecting the bird, and I can go back a little bit. So when I did this selection in Photoshop, it was a question about, okay, I select the subject, I select the bird, or I guess for the same ideas, like if you do a landscape shot and you select a building or something, right? You can select whatever. Once you start working on it, sometimes you get a halo around it, like you get like this bright area around the bird. And I don't have that problem when I select the subject. It can become a problem when you edit it. So if I work on the bird and I push my sliders too much, I make that bird too bright or something, then I may get some artificial looks to it where it looks like it has like a halo around it, right? And I believe that's probably more of an issue when there's more dramatic lighting, like doing a sunrise or doing a sunset or with like a bright light, and you over edit it, then you can get those halos. But in this case, it was kind of like an overcast, cloudy day. I did not see that being an issue. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I have a question coming from the audience about the ISO, which is 3200 on the right image. Yeah. Now, so it was about the question about the left image and the right image, because there was such a difference in the ISO speed. And to be honest, the ISO, I may have had it set to auto, because when I was driving, now the right side image, when I was driving down that road and I saw the fox coming towards me, I had my camera just sitting next to me and I only had a few seconds to like stop the car, roll down the window, grab my camera, try to focus on the fox and snap away. And I probably had no time to set it up manually, because it was just like, oh, there's a fox walking. Let me get a picture real quick. Right. The snow is probably a little brighter than it could be. And I Now, if all the other settings are the same and the ISO is lower, let's say 1600 or 800 or 400, that would make the picture a little darker. It would. So then the snow would be darker. Everything would be darker, but then again, I can fix that in post-processing. I can bring property brightness back in the fogs. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions? Anything on the chat? No questions on the chat? All right.
Anybody has questions, they can unmute themselves. Otherwise, I want to thank Robert for great presentations, great images. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, everyone.
Any other questions in the crowd? Any?
How can you be so good?
Good at what?
Lots of practice.
I said good at what?
Thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Couple thank yous in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to start packing up here. You guys are welcome to stay in the meeting, but we have to pack up the computers and stuff here. So thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
It was great, thanks.
Thank you so much.